Perfect. Okay, so who are we and why are we here? We are the Third Sector Lab team. We run a digital agency based in Scotland, but working across the UK that includes kind of website businesses. We work on website consultancy projects, sorry. We do a range of work kind of across digital, but always in the third sector. If you want to find out a bit more about us, we've got a little QR code to our website there. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Ross, before I get into the
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to add that probably an easy way of thinking about our work is on the services side. We do a lot of website design development work. Robin's involved in a lot of content and campaigns work. I do quite a lot of digital transformation consultancy and training with people in the third sector. And then on the program side, we deliver quite a lot of work that's fully funded for the sector. So things like the Curve, which is our training program that you're on today. So we've got another training session coming up with David Skur on AI, and we'll have workshops running usually every 2 weeks. If you go on the Third Sector Lab website and click on the training tab. Other things, we run the open working programme. So if you get funding from the Robertson Trust or the National Lottery in Scotland, you can access the open working programme. You can go and have a look at that. We will have another cohort starting soon. And Digital Trustees, which is trying to get more people from the tech sector onto charity boards. And if that sounds like something you could benefit from, then go and explore that on our website. There's free support for charities across the UK with that one. I think that's it. Jen, anything I've missed?
No, nothing for me. Sounds good.
Cool.
Lovely. So I'll move through. Today, what we're hoping to kind of give you by the end of it is a kind of preparation for how you go out to tender for a website project, an understanding of the process from start to finish. So from the very thought of kind of we need to have a new website to kind of final product and further development, working effectively with different providers. Obviously, we are a provider, but we kind of come with a disclaimer of this is not a sales pitch for us. This is about the project process in general. And then addressing common myths about website projects that we've come across in the space. This is also a session that can be shaped by you. So if you've got specific questions or queries or problems that you're having, this is the space to bring them to as well. That's something that we want to build into the session. It will be interactive, so we'll have various points where I might get you to add to a Menti. I love a little Menti. So do keep an eye out for those as well, but we'll signpost you appropriately. We've got given a little bit of an outline of who we are, but here are some nice smiley professional photos of us that I've immediately skipped past by accident. Lovely. Yes, I don't know if it's worth going over again, but Ross is our director. I'm the lead on content and campaigns, and we'll come to what content is and why it's important kind of in the website process later on. And then Jen is our wonderful designer and developer that makes it a thing.
Thanks, Robin. Worth saying as well, we're experimenting with an AI slides tool. It's called Gamma app, isn't it? Is that right? People are interested in what has created this. So yeah, it's quite interesting. The lovely photographs that you'll see in the slides as well are from our Tech for Good Scotland event. So the next one we've got is coming up in May. Again, I don't know if there's, I'm going to put a code in the chat box. Don't actually know if I should do it. No, there's not many people on this call. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. I'm going to do this. Robin, don't look at me. Don't give me that face. If you're interested in coming to Tech for Good Scotland, it has sold out. If you use that code, you can get a free ticket. But if you go to the Third Sector Lab website, you'll be able to get it. It's in Glasgow, so those of you in Manchester and elsewhere, or like Bangor, probably you're not going to travel for it. We won't take it personally. Right, preparing for a website project. Jen and I are going to tackle this section, and we'll hand back to Robin. The big thing before you're starting any website project is really thinking about what is your organisation trying to achieve over the next year, potentially over the next 5 years, and really what are your organisational goals, and how does a new website or a redevelopment of your existing website help you achieve those goals. So today's session, I'd like to think about, we're talking about redeveloping a website, or we're talking about building a website from scratch, but a lot of the stuff we're talking about today applies even if you're not taking that journey and you simply have a new website and you need support around content, or structure, or being a bit more user focused. But the ultimate thing is, what is in our business plan? What is in our strategy? What are we actually looking to achieve? What is tangible? What is measurable? and how does that become the key goals for the website as well? So if you have a big fundraising target you want to meet, or you need to recruit 15 volunteers to keep a project sustainable, or you need to increase referrals from local primary schools, what we're thinking about is how does a website help us do the heavy lifting of that, not simply seeing a website as a brochure or a piece of marketing activity, but actually how does it help us achieve the things we're trying to do as an organisation. From there, we'd help you think about who are primary users and what do they need, and being really specific about that. So hopefully moving conversations, they can often be things like we want to connect with local authorities and always have this vision of the entirety of South Lanarkshire Council sitting behind a single laptop. What do we mean when we say local authorities? What do we mean when we say schools? What do we mean when we use vague terms like stakeholders? So really drilling down, who are those specific people? What do they need? And ultimately what we're thinking about is how do we offer value to people, and how do we make it as simple as possible to know what they want and need from you, and where does that discovery and user research process help us with that. One of the things I'd like to think about is what internal resources are able to support the project. So budget's obviously part of it, but a bigger part of it is time and commitment from people. So do people want you to redevelop a website or rethink your content? Who is going to set aside the time for writing that content and thinking it through and sitting in planning meetings and discovery sessions with users? If you treat a website project as we go out to tender, we write a big tech spec doc, and then we just hand it over to someone and some miracle will happen 6 months down the line, it's highly unlikely that there's going to be any kind of positive business change that comes out of that. So we really need to understand what you're trying to do and what do your users want and need. Some good questions coming in the chat box, and we'll kind of pick those up kind of as we go and towards the end. We'll make sure they're all answered. So do please keep your questions coming. Budgeting and timeline, we're going to speak about a lot of this stuff at detail as we go through. So set a realistic budget, include contingency plans, so 10 to 20% for unexpected changes. And the way that we work is we always give clients a fixed budget. So if we were pitching for work, we would say, your budget is this. We have never gone over budget on a website project. Depending on who you're working with, they might not operate in those terms. So it might be that they have set days, and if you go slightly over those days, you're going to have to pay people. They might budget in different ways. So be clear about that stuff when you're thinking about how you outline that in your proposal. So what type of budgeting would you like the provider to come back with and talk about? Allow sufficient time for the tender process and project execution. So we would usually say for a build, 14 to 16 weeks. For the actual tender process, maybe 4 weeks will be plenty. I don't know if Robin or Jen, if you want to jump in on that bit about the tender process, what you feel feels like a sufficient time from getting the tender live to choosing the right provider.
I probably don't have anything to add on that one, because I think sometimes these things can be a little bit how long is a piece of string, and depending on well, yeah, if you've done kind of discovery work beforehand and things, but in terms of preparing that tender and that brief, I'll speak about that in a wee bit more in another slide. But in terms of timings, also I've just seen somebody said in the chat there that someone's taken 3 months. Is that for the tender or for the full process? The process, yeah, both. Okay, so that's script up as part of that. But yeah, nothing more to add on that bit, Ross.
I'm probably happy handing over to you just now, Jen, about defining a clear vision and brief then.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the next slide, I will give the perspective as somebody who receives these briefs, and some kind of common mistakes and things that I would maybe like to see, to save the questions that will be inevitably asked as a result of missing bits in briefs. So first of all, kicking off with the target audience goals and objectives, and we've spoken about that a little bit already, but you'd be amazed at how much this basic thing is actually missed from briefs. So what does success look like for you as for your organization? And I would encourage you to think about how it sits within your wider organizational goals, and let your development partner be creative as well in terms of helping you think about how your website can align to that overall vision of the organization. The next one that I would outline is that accessibility, inclusivity, and responsiveness should be a given. So it's 2025. The majority of us are spending a lot of time browsing the web on mobile. I think that having responsiveness as a selling point on a website nowadays is really redundant. However, it is really important to make that explicit within your brief. And show that as a client you have taken this stuff into consideration, because it can really kind of set you up for positive for positive. Sorry, I'm doing that thing when I'm reading the chat at the same time. I will ignore that just now. Yeah, for a positive experience. If you have specific accessibility guidelines that you're looking to meet, so someone's mentioned in the chat that charity websites need to be WCAG2 compliant, that's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the AA standard, I'm assuming. So there's different levels of accessibility, and your funding source, your stakeholders, your board might have that prescribed somewhere. So you should make sure that that level is outlined in your brief, the target that you're working towards. And I can share some resources afterwards of where you can see what the difference is between those different levels of accessibility. Accessibility, even if you work with a wide range of people, and you might not want to be focusing on one specific area of accessibility, but good accessible websites are better for everyone. So it's definitely a really important point. And the point on inclusivity as well there is, when you are working with a developer to includes imagery and iconography and things like that, that those should be inclusive and representative of your audience. The next one is, again, from my perspective, specify your integration requirements early. So I've definitely had the situation before where you kind of almost at the point of a website, you're doing your kind of final contact forms, and the client asks if, oh, wouldn't it be great if this could speak to Salesforce, or that kind of thing. So it's really good to outline any specific integration requirements that you have at this point. However, if you don't know, that's okay. But if you give an outline of the different tools that you are working with and how you would expect them to talk to each other without having the understanding of what the actual integration is, that is okay. Which kind of leads into the next point around tech prescription. So as the client, you don't need to feel obligated to come up with the solutions. If you want to make, kind of suggestions and things, that's great. But your expertise lies in the area of the problem you're trying to solve, and I would encourage you not to bog yourself down in technical solutions to that. That is why you are paying experts to work in that area. And I would always encourage you to kind of make sure that you ask the questions that you want to, and which we'll come on to talk later a little bit around red flags, but lack of transparency is a big red flag for me in the industry. There's a lot of gatekeeping happens, and it's something that I've got a personal mission to kind of challenge around kind of these misconceptions around website design and development. Your in-house skill set, so it's important to think about this for now and in the future. So if you have somebody in-house who builds websites for passion projects, we've got to be mindful of that skill set and what the longevity of it is. If you if that's not a role that you will continually have, or you've just been blessed that somebody has kind of website development skills on top of their role, we shouldn't be relying on that. It should be that you're provided with a content management system that works for a range of digital skill sets, so that you have the control over your website and are not incurring additional costs at a later date to change the phone number in your footer when you move premises or something like that. It should be something that you have control over. The next thing I'll just talk about briefly is SEO analytics and measurement. So again, I think it should be a given, but it isn't always. So looking to outline whether or not you expect basic search engine optimization or an advanced package to be part of the project that you're writing a brief for. It's good to be explicit and keep the agency accountable, but also, again, showing that you have considered this stuff and are thinking about how we are going to measure the success of the website going forward, and how people are going to find it. And I noticed that there was a point in there from in the chat from Carol. You'd mentioned that you don't have a website as such, but interested to know if you need a website. Search engine optimization can be a really big kind of factor for that. Getting yourself well placed there on Google as another pipeline of potential clients or customers or service users is a really kind of important thing. So even if you're working on a kind of really beautiful and perfectly optimized landing page, that is still a really good shout. And then finally, your budget and timeline expectations. So it's really good to kind of set these expectations up front, particularly the timeline one, because if you're intending on turning a website project around in the next 4 weeks, that will kind of influence the type of agencies that will then bid for that piece of work, and it allows agencies to figure out whether or not that actually fits within their overall workload is. There's a couple of questions come in. Is that okay, Ross, Robin? I just jump in on some of the ones that are relevant to this slide at this point?
Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah.
Nice one. So I'll try my best to start from where these come in. So Nicola says, what do you think about undertaking a discovery page to work through requirements before procurement? I always struggle with that word, sorry. So I think anything that you can do to front load that work in advance of going to tender is really important. We'll talk about our process a little bit later in the session today, and I think that a discovery process is something that should be happening as part of a website development project anyway, but whether that happens before or after you go to tender, I guess could depend on your budget restrictions as well. But I would say from my point of view, I would like as much information as possible, and if you can front load some of that work in-house, then absolutely.
Can I just jump in there as well? Just I guess a recent example, we're building Inclusion Scotland's new website, and as part of that, they're doing some research with Glasgow Uni around being a member of Inclusion Scotland and what it means to people. And actually the value in that research is getting to the heart of what being a member of Inclusion Scotland is. The value of the discovery phase would not be what do you think needs to be on a membership page on a website. What do you like about the website as a member? So it's easy sometimes with website projects to kind of fall into the trap of, like, we're about to develop a website, we need to ask very website focused questions to people as part of that discovery phase. And actually discovery is more about understanding what your users want and need. Is it aligned with business objectives? And a lot of discovery work is not really about the website at all. It's really getting to the heart of what your business is doing and who you're trying to connect with. So don't worry too much if you're not an expert in that stuff. That's not really the important bit at that stage, I wouldn't say.
Absolutely. Jess, your question around, is it obvious to a designer what is meant basic and advanced in relation to SEO? So what are the features of either category if it isn't? So in my view, basic SEO is around the kind of setting the website up from a technical perspective to allow itself the best chance. So for example, there are meta descriptions that can be included within your content, making sure that the HTML structure lends itself well. And I'm getting into kind of technicalities here, but there are things behind the scenes that Google looks for that might not immediately be obvious to you. There are certainly tools that you can kind of, if you've got an existing website, have a wee look at how that is performing at the moment. But there are behind the scenes things that should just happen. In terms of advanced search engine optimization, that would be more of a kind of content led, I would suggest, around hitting particular keywords and restructuring your content for the particular keywords that you're looking to hit. But yes, search engine optimization is a discipline in itself. and it can get very, very advanced. The search engine optimization can be a full-time job for chasing those high Google results. So, but yeah, there are basic things that should just be a given, and then advanced is for a more kind of targeted approach for your particular organisation. I'll just jump in and see if there's anything else before I hand over. For new and small rare disease charities that are setting up their first proper website, agencies are likely to be out of budget. How could we identify good freelancers? Ross, you might want to come into this. My gut is word of mouth and ask people. LinkedIn is really good for kind of opportunities like that. I don't know if you've probably got more experience in that than me.
I mean, I suppose, but I mean, it's a theme that will run throughout this session is like speak to other charities. So like, you know, don't just go out to market. Like, ask other charities, have you had good experience of working with an agency? What was it like? What was their budget? How long did it take? What would you do differently? So have those conversations with other people, and like places like LinkedIn are a good place to just do that quite openly and transparently. We'll also put a link to, we run a WhatsApp group. We've got about 500 people working in the charity digital space in that group. We'll put a link to that at the end. In that group, people regularly ask for advice and information. That's quite a good space to do it. Picking up Sid's point about budget, what I would say is, like, as soon as you get under the kind of maybe like £7,000-ish mark, you might be into the realms of doing something yourself. We won't get, I mean, that's a whole other workshop, but you know, if you're using a tool like Squarespace, for example, we are not precious about everything needs to be built in WordPress. We happen to use it because it's very flexible. For most charities needs, it's very, very good. If you simply need a landing page that says we have a project, here is the project, it might be overkill for you. So do think about that stuff and don't always assume that what you need is a big WordPress build to do what you need to do.
Nice. Obviously keep questions coming, but we'd love to hear from you at this point as well. We're going to jump into Menti. There we go. Loading up. If you've not used it before, there's a few different ways to get in. So if you want to engage on your phone, you can scan that QR code there. If you'd like to join directly, I can grab this link for you and I'll pop it into the chat, or you can go to menti.com and pop in this code. 1 second, I'll do some juggling to share this link with you. But yeah, I feel like we're getting to know you and your kind of specific website contexts in the chat, but it'd be good to just get to know a bit more. And I'm quite a visual person, so I'd love to see this in a classic word cloud. Excellent. Cool. So I'm going to share this screen instead, hopefully. This is where it all goes wrong. Oh, excellent. Things are coming in. I can no longer see you all, but that's okay. So please, somebody else shout if we need to. But we've got some kind of, what are your goals for your website? Customers, that's a huge one. So that might be if you're a social enterprise, but if you are a kind of more traditional charity, that includes your kind of your users, perhaps your funders fall into a kind of separate category there. Want it to be user friendly, provide support and awareness. That's a huge one, is almost kind of what is your website's one of the easiest ways that people can find you. It doesn't require them to be on any social media platforms. It can be quite a trusted way to think of whatever brochures you have. This is your brochure to the world. People say it wants to drive action. That's a huge one. So as a content designer, often what I'll do is go through websites and kind of say, this is lovely, but it could be a poster. How do we make sure it actually does something for you and for the people that want to use it? Needs to be accurate, needs to perform fundraising activities, increased engagement, immigration information in kind of multiple languages. Yeah, I think everybody's got the kind of action focused stuff that we love to see. Your website should work for you, and not the other way around. It should basically make your job easier. So a lot of the work that we do when we work with organizations, it ends up bringing up a lot of process conversations where we start talking about, how do you do this? Do you email someone a form and then they edit it and send it back to you? And could that be a form on the website so that it's all just smooth and comes to you directly? So it can often streamline those kind of internal processes as well. Lovely. Ross and Jen, are there any that you want to pick up on there?
I don't think so. I think you've kind of covered it. I mean, I'd really echo Robin's point about getting the Bowden stuff right. Is like the amount of kind of rebuilds that we come in and do work with charities. And the big thing actually that failed with the previous website was there's often good information, but so many kind of dead ends. So I read a thing about a service and then I get to the end of it and I'm like, I don't really know what you want to do next. And so people then have to pick up the phone or fill out a blank contact form. And actually that kind of getting the Bowden stuff right is really key. And how do we get people to transact? Yeah,
Yeah.
Jen, I don't know if there's anything for you.
No, I think this is almost like exactly what we would do as part of a scoping exercise, and seeing things so action focused makes me happy, which is great.
Nice. Excellent. So yeah, just to clarify, we'll talk through our specific process, but if you are thinking about doing a discovery process for yourselves, this is a great exercise to do with your team, to think about kind of who are your different users or your audiences. Your communication strategy, if you've got one, might kind of lay this out really neatly already, but kind of who are they, and then what do you want them to be able to do? And that's the first question that any provider will ask you. So if you've got that laid out, you're already a lot of the way there. So I'll move to this next slide. What are you most concerned about when it comes to website projects? Can everyone access that okay? Or I might need to reshare the link. We shall see. Please feel free to unmute or say something in the chat if it's not working.
Working okay for me, Robin.
Cool. Everyone's just so unbothered that there's no concerns. There we go. Big one there, making it easy to update. A huge one. Yeah, kind of like Jen was saying, you don't want to be kind of running to a developer every time you want to change a comma. Your website should be yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to come in. It's the cost, and it probably ties into Christina's question in the chat box there. Is like, we are very hesitant to take higher budgets off clients where the thing that's being developed requires a lot of time, and actually a third party tool might be able to do some of that heavy lifting. So obvious things around that are like, we want a community on our website. So there's, first of all, that's going to cost a lot of money. Secondly, probably nobody will use it. And maybe you need something as simple as a WhatsApp group, or using something like Mighty Networks to do some of that stuff. Most fundraising platforms will have good journey flows built into them. Choosing the right fundraising platform for your needs is a much better way of doing it, rather than going, we need to use this platform, but it actually doesn't achieve what you want to do. And then you end up into kind of custom development time. So the bits where costs creeps is when you're moving to complexity, often without really needing the complexity. And that's where that discovery work is so critical. And particularly if you're thinking about, one of the things that you might put in the tender is, we want to build a community of our members. We have 400 members. We are not wedded to any solution. And then it's on the developer to come back with options. Now, one of the options might be we integrate that on a website. That has cost. One of the other options is you might use an off-the-shelf tool, which might be free, or it might have a low monthly cost, and you might be able to set that up with a bit of guidance from elsewhere. So not rushing into the kind of trap of feeling like your website has to do the heavy lifting of everything, when actually often it can't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge thing of like, it's not always the answer. There's lots of good stuff in here about, there's a concern over SEO. Just to say, obviously, kind of Jen was saying, there's lots of different kind of levels to it. We run a curve session, we run a series of curve sessions on SEO before, and I can include those in the follow-up email if that's kind of something that's causing people concern. There's lots of things you can do from your end that aren't very technical that can help your website to be found. So if you're thinking about, it can be as simple as if you're writing kind of content for any of your services page or any blog posts that you do, really thinking about what somebody might search to find that and having that in mind. That's obviously your kind of at the most basic end of it. But the more technical stuff your provider would hopefully do for you. But the courses that we have quite nicely demystify a lot of that as well. I promise it's not as scary as it looks. Lots of people are kind of saying they're worried about technical expertise, technical understanding. You only need to be experts in what you do. And hopefully we'll give you some good guidelines today on the right questions to ask of your provider so that you're kind of getting something that works for you in the long run. Somebody else has said scope creep, which is, yeah, fair enough. Kind of how do you stop this from kind of growing arms and legs? So related to that, somebody saying having too much content. Equally, somebody else is saying you could outgrow the website. So I guess this is where content design comes in, and I'll come to this. But my job as a content designer is to help you think about saying kind of as much as you can in the simplest and most kind of concise way possible, and really helping you. One of the biggest problems we see with websites is people adding new pages and new sections and new kind of, it grows arms and legs very quickly. You need to have a kind of clear journey, and if you're going to make any changes to that, that needs to be really considered. But we'll come to that. Thank you so much. That was really useful. Hopefully, as we go through, we'll be able to speak to these examples and make sure that we're covering those. But that was great. Thank you. We should be back at my slides now. Excellent. Now we're going to get into some myths. So hopefully everything that this does makes the website process a little bit less intimidating. Myths. Jen, do you want to talk myths?
I am happy to talk myths, yeah. So myth number one, you need a new website. So the reality in this is that enhancements may suffice instead of a full redesign. So if you are finding that people aren't necessarily following the calls to action that you want to follow, it's maybe about the kind of placement of those, but it's not always about kind of ripping everything up and starting again. There's probably a bit of a cost benefit analysis that would happen there in terms of the exercise of outlining what your website originally set out to do versus how it's working now. It may be that you just need to maybe get a bit of development time in to do some sugaring about and kind of testing of new ideas rather than a full redesign at this stage, particularly if budget is a concern. We're not always about just ripping up and starting again. However, it would need to focus on the back end as well. So we've alluded a couple of times to you being able to manage your own website. So it may be that the back end can do with some enhancement as well and making that more user friendly for you. Myth number two, a new website will solve all your problems. I have actually heard this phrase before. So when this new website solves all our problems, and as a provider, I don't want to be like it's not going to, but also yeah, just to kind of emphasize that a website is one tool in a broader strategy, and it's about how that works with an overall organization. Myth number three, website design is all about aesthetics. So I saw a submission in the previous slide around it being potentially boring, and while I'm so gutted, and this is one for Ross and Robin as well, I talk about a website called lingscars.com quite a lot because it is famously known as one of the most terrible websites in the world. And when I was at college studying this stuff, it was always used as an example. They've redesigned their website and it's like clean now. So I'm absolutely gutted. But that was a really good example of a website that had all the flashing bells and whistles and looked very much like a kind of 90s, late 90s free website. Functionality, user experience, and content can also make things engaging, and it's not just about things looking pretty. We're actually moving to a more kind of minimalistic style in terms of web design, where it's very much less is more. We are working in a space where people are constantly bombarded with information, and with us all trying to protect our mental health a bit better, the less is more approach is certainly something that I'm seeing come across in terms of aesthetics. And myth number 4, one that I'm very, very passionate about, is once your site is live, it's finished. Your website is a living resource that should live and develop and grow with your organization. And that very much feeds into the idea of your content management system being nice, robust, and flexible enough to be able to adapt with you as you grow as an organization, especially because we are in a sector where it can be, or especially just now, it can be very volatile. Funding is getting pulled left, right, and centre. You might have to make some kind of updates to your, or pivot your strategy really quite quickly, and your website shouldn't be holding you up from being able to communicate that with the world. And especially on another point I'd make is just around, we all know what's happening with social media at the moment. It feels very, where it is the go-to place. So and it's coming back to, I think it was Christina's point around, do you actually need a website? Well, if you don't have Twitter anymore, and that is all kind of, we're not getting the same reach that way, then that kind of stuff's going to become more important. I'll hand over to Ross and Robin if you've got anything that you want to add on any of those points, and if there's any concerns as well of things that you've heard that you might feel is a myth that we can maybe debunk or give a bit of reassurance about, please do pop it in the chat as well.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I was just about to put in some links or some questions there. Come in. I was about to put on some links of sites that we'd built just so people could get a sense of some of the work, but I was terrible at multitasking and got halfway through and then failed miserably. So if you get a chance, Jen, that'd be amazing. I'm just thinking particularly ones like Simon Community and Ayla, which we've built recently, and if there's any other ones as well. So, Robin, are we okay? Move on to the next slide.
Yeah, sounds good. It's just to kind of quickly go into that last myth there about just reiterating that once your site is live, it's finished. Obviously, kind of a website project can't go on forever, but we do like to kind of say websites are never finished. They should stay updated. They should reflect what you do day to day, as Jen was saying. I'll move to the next slide now. So, oh gosh, skipping ahead. Tender process, what do organisations need to know? And I'm going to throw that to you, Ross.
Yep, brilliant, thank you. So we're gonna talk through these kind of 4 key points that you need to know about the process. That discovery phase that, whether you call it discovery or needs assessment, but really understanding how to prep and really thinking about your needs to define requirements really clearly. So, sometimes there will be requirements that have come from other people and you may have to put them in there, and then the discussion might open up. So it might be that someone on your board has decided you need to put a forum on your website and you think it's a terrible idea. But can you put these things in a way that you can have these discussions with your developers? And this is also where having that ability to have a kind of two-way dialogue before you make decisions is really critical. So having a question about, is the forum actually essential? Would you like us to put in costings where we cost a build with a forum and one without a forum? So defining requirements and also being clear about some of those requirements that are a definite and some that are not. A really nice example, actually, we're speaking to a healthcare provider at the moment and exploring building a website for them. There's a few things that have come from senior management that are maybe not what the person who wants to build a website wants to do, and there's not been a lot of scoping done in it. And so one of the things we're helping them do is think about giving different pricing based on that functionality. So what would a website look like? What would the website look like with live chat? What would the website look like with live chat and also with an interactive health questionnaire that's built into the website as well? So again, just thinking about complexity sometimes has business benefit, sometimes complexity simply just adds complexity for the user and adds cost and time for you as well. Think about doing a pre-tender estimate to benchmark costs. It's quite useful if you can go into this giving people an idea of what budget you have. That helps choose the agencies. If you're going to work with a big global agency based in London who works with multinational clients, and you are a small community-based charity in Scotland, probably you're not going to have the right budget, and probably them putting a tender in is going to be fairly pointless. So given some indication of scope is useful. There's always this thing about, well, if we tell them how much they've got, they will just go to the max. Sometimes that might be the case with some providers, but what I would say is what you don't want this is to be a guessing game. So having those kind of open discussions with providers, that also gives you a sense of like, what is their ethos? How do they actually budget for things? Do they give a flat cost? Do they budget in days? How do they break that stuff down and give us clarity of where that money is going? We've got some documents which we're going to share at the end that's going to help with this bit. So we've got a couple of documents around carrying out a simple website audit and also thinking what needs to be in this stuff that we're talking about. So when you're creating a request for a proposal, really clear objectives, thinking about the scope, think about a timeline. So sometimes there'll be bits in that timeline that have been dictated. So it could be it's our 20th anniversary, we've got a celebration event in September, we need the website built by August. It could be that the board have just set a deadline and this is the deadline that I have to stick to. Don't be afraid to put some of those in, but equally, maybe sometimes you've got flex, and what you want to do is ask the provider, what would a timeline look to them? Now, that will differ on a range of things. So it could be that the provider can't start your work until a month's time because they've got loads of stuff in their pipeline. It might be that someone is going to build, our typical build time be 14 to 16 weeks, but some people might take less time, some people might take longer, and just asking those questions of what that timeline would typically look like. We've spoken about budget. Think about evaluation criteria. So how are you going to cover that? And we'll kind of cover that in a wee bit more detail probably when they come to the Q&A later on. I'm doing some work at the moment with Carnegie UK Trust for a separate project, but around digital. 5% of their evaluation criteria is around corporate social responsibility. So does your provider pay the Scottish Living Wage? Do they have clear processes around sustainability? And that's 5% of that ranking. Cost will be a factor. Experience will be a factor. So thinking about how all these things come to play and not simply just rushing towards one of those evaluation criteria. Specify accessibility requirements if applicable. Again, we can pick that up in a wee bit more detail. Jen's touched on that a wee bit already. Do remember it's the provider's job to solve your problems. It's not your job to deliver a complete to-do list. So don't fall into the trap of thinking we need to cover every single eventuality or we're going to get ripped off or they're not going to know what the scope is. It's much more important for you to be clear about what you want to achieve, and then those proposals are going to outline how they think they could best achieve it. And the discovery work will help shape that as well. So much better to say we are struggling to recruit volunteers. We guess that our current process of having 5 complicated messy pages about volunteering and then a Word document are not working. What could we do differently? And it's up to the provider to think about some of those kind of top line solutions to do that. Shortlisting agencies, so research agencies through professional networks, and also case studies. Think about the things that are important to you. So is it important to you that they've worked with similar organisations before? Is it important to you that they're local to you? Most people work remotely now. We work with charities across the UK. Robin's doing some work with a European organisation at the moment. Proximity to where you're based becomes less important. But I would say within that is we've done quite a bit of work recently with people like Simon Community and with the Junction in Edinburgh, where we're doing discovery work with their members and their users, and that's in person as well as online. So is that important? And then think about pre-tender meetings to clarify requirements and assess agency fit. So creating a simple Q&A document, maybe an open Google Doc where people can input into that, maybe having a half-hour drop-in session with you and the team where any providers who want to put a proposal in can ask questions about that in advance. So keeping dialogue open is really critical, but making it a fair process. Red flags. Jen will talk about these. She's got lots of them and they're usually pretty good. So avoiding agencies that solutionize without understanding your needs or fail to explain technical decisions clearly. As Jen pointed out, an agency that is a gatekeeper of the tech is not a great agency to work with. So you should know the technology that's underpinning what you do. If they're using a builder tool, what is that builder tool? Do you have access to it? What are the plugins that are going to be on our website? Are they secure? How do you keep them secure? Do we have to pay for these as we go forward? So don't worry too much about you coming up with these solutions. That's the agency's job. Really, that critical first part of that process is understanding user needs and doing good discovery. Some of it will sit at your end before you write the tender, but a good agency will work through that with you once they win the work. Anything that I've missed, Jen or Robin, from that I'm just conscious of time, and I wanted to kind of get through it, but anything I've missed from the tender process?
I will just jump in on the red flags bit, and I'm not here to sit and slate anybody. But I have unfortunately come across many builds, not the ones that I did, that look really pretty on the front end and in the back are like spaghetti. So that is something that, while it's annoying for you, like, to not be able to kind of work with that in the back end, if you ever want to work with, so it's almost like when an agency makes it so difficult for anyone else to work with something that you're kind of forced to stay with them. That is something that I can't stand. And I'm a lot of my I spend a lot of time trying to help sort stuff like that out for people. But yeah, really, if, in my view, if someone can't explain the back end to you in simple terms, then that to me is a major red flag, because I think it's really important in this industry, as Ross said around gatekeeping, it's really important to make sure that we are transparent, and that works both ways. So it's something that, it's about demystifying things at our end as well. So there has been the occasion where somebody said, oh, can you just spin up a new page? And you're like, well, actually, that's a half-day job, or depending on what it is and things. So it's about clarifying how long things take from both sides. And from my perspective, I really like to say this will take a half day because, and talk about, it's not just, using a template and that kind of thing, being able to explain that. So I'll hit out with all my red flags, probably potentially in the Q&A session as well. But yeah, that's me. Robin, have you got anything else to add to this bit?
Just kind of written something in the chat about you should be empowered to use your own website. Part of the provider's job is to help you to understand the tools that they give you and to work in partnership with you to make sure that what you build is something that's useful. So yeah, just like I wanted to get the word empower there, because I think that's something that we're really passionate about. Lovely. Now we're going to move through our process. So you've picked a developer. What happens next? This is a look in at our process. It won't be exactly like this for all organizations, but it's a pretty standard kind of way of working. So we're going to talk through. We've been talking a lot about scoping and discovery. That's kind of what this is here. So as we say, your tender might, I don't want to mess with that. Your tender might mean that you've done some discovery work already. You could almost kind of do half of it before to inform your brief, and then your provider could help you do the second half. Or you might do it all on one end. But your provider needs to understand what you're doing, whether that's through documentation or through speaking with you or speaking with your potential users. So we use this as a kind of getting to know each other stage and kind of setting out any expectations, questions, concerns. The kind of chats that we're having with you now is something that your provider wants to understand as well. Jen, I don't know if you want to come in on wireframing.
Yeah, so I like to start off talking about wireframing with my initial approach to wireframing. So again, go back to my kind of college days, I was very much encouraged to wireframe out everything I do, and my instinct was, what a waste of time, just let me on the tools and get this assignment done. And then I started working in the real world and realised what a pivotal part of the design and development process that wireframing is. So if you're not familiar with wireframing, it is essentially a kind of blueprint structure of your website. It is not styled, but it is essentially diagrams that give a full kind of outline of basically the target pages of the website. It will include details of kind of like a visual indication of how much content you're looking for in terms of copy, in specific areas, and where certain images are going to be placed and all that kind of thing. And the reason why this section or this stage is so important is because it is a lot easier to fix and kind of iron out issues on a wireframe, which is essentially just a diagram, than it is down when we get to the site development stage. So yeah, that is a really good, for me, a non-negotiable part of the development process. And leading into a kind of red flag, it would be that if your developer is going straight into the codes and building stuff out for you, have a wee look at their portfolio and see if everything looks the same. That's all I would say. I've been in the back end before where someone's been sold a bespoke build, and then you go in and they've actually left the template code in the back end. So that is gets my blood pressure going. But yeah, so really important point for that from the client perspective is letting you see the content input requirements, and most importantly in context as well. So our aim when Robin and I work together on wireframing is to be able to basically hand over to the client, here's where we need your input, and you can see it, and we've worked on that together, so there should be no surprises. And make sure that the clients understands how their content is going to sit in context. And most importantly, I would say that it actually reduces the development time. So if the thinking and stuff is all front loaded, it makes the rest of the process a lot faster, in my view. From the, will I just carry on, Robin?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so from there we would kind of split off, and if you are fortunate enough in your development process to have a Robin, you will have someone there who will be supporting you with that content development, where we kind of split off here into the two kind of in tandem pieces. Robin will talk a wee bit more about content development and our process around that, but just before I hand over, I will just talk about visual style development. So we like to provide a homepage mock-up with the kind of proposed colours and visual style that will then be used across the site. And it's basically same as wireframing, getting us set up on the best foot to try and avoid surprises going forward. We never like to go for the big reveal, and because it's scary, and also that we're working on something collaboratively, so it's not something that we go burrow away and then pop out with a brand new website, which was kind of mentioned earlier on. And this is again a good opportunity for you to start to be able to visualize this and set the tone for the rest of the site. Content development is still underway at this point, but this is where I would go down on the tools and start to really kind of build out everything that we've spoken about this far, getting it on a staging environment. And I like to call this part making it real, making it a thing that you can work with. Robin, do you want to chat about content and how that works alongside these bits?
I do indeed. So your content, it's not just the copywriting, but the copywriting is a huge part of it. It's any stuff you have on your website. It's kind of all the videos, even the way that you present information is considered your kind of content design. So my job when I work with clients is to think about what goes where, kind of on your site, and think about what buckets content fall into, so thinking really about those user journeys. So taking everything we've learned so far in user testing, somebody needs to visit this page to do this. My job is to lay it out so that that can happen. Somebody's asked in the chat what a staging site is. So that's a kind of version of your website that's not open to the public. So it can be kind of local. So there's lots of websites that start their lives on Jen's computer, and then kind of go out into the world. Have I described that accurately?
Yeah, you've designed it very well, actually.
Cool. And then, yes, sorry, I got distracted by that.
We need that. We need to put that somewhere for the client to be able to see, essentially, without the wider world seeing it. So yeah, staging. I don't know where that comes from. Actually, I've always just staging environment.
Yeah, it's like a stage. It's like a test.
Yeah.
But yes, so I'll work with clients to think about what goes where. I'll ask them for a first draft. You guys, we do think of it as a partnership. So you are the expert in the things you want to say. And a lot of it will exist. So whether you've got a website at the moment or whether you've got other materials, you might have a fundraising report or a guide or an ops report. You've written down likely what you do somewhere. So it'll exist in some form. And if it doesn't, you should know it. It's what you do. So it's my job to really help you kind of get that down onto the page. If you give me a first draft, I then kind of edit at the other side. If you don't have me, or if you don't have a content designer, then it is kind of really important to make sure that that content is ready. Your provider will provide you with an outline for kind of when they're aiming to have things done by. If you haven't completed your content by then, unfortunately, you're looking at a kind of empty shell of a website that doesn't have any of the good stuff. It's really, it's one of those things that can take up a lot of capacity if you don't have any support. So yeah, it's important to know that. It's also, a lot of providers might kind of give you an empty website and ask you to put the content on there. So while that's a great way to get to know your website, it's also quite overwhelming, and you're not a web developer. So we put content on for clients. Not everybody does. That's worth checking. Perhaps from this, I'd love to put together a kind of checklist. That might be quite useful for when you're kind of choosing providers. But yes, from there, well, sorry, Jen, were you going to go for it?
No, not at all. Yeah, but from there, we move into testing and refinement, and in simple terms, it's making sure everything works as it should. We will obviously do our own kind of internal testing, but it is really important at this point to get some wider eyeballs on this. Hopefully, we would have some kind of website working group, but actually, this is the point where we'd start to maybe kind of start to show it to users, show it to other stakeholders, and gain feedback. At this stage, we tend to form two lists. One is a development opportunity and one is a showstopper. So showstopper is essentially the website cannot launch until this is fixed. And that's when scope creep is most likely to present its ugly head, and you might end up having a bit of kind of conversations there. However, if the process like this has been, these key areas of a process have been followed, we have really kind of minimised the opportunity or the likelihood of a kind of last minute thing coming out of there. And then finally, and I always say finally, and I shouldn't say finally, we go to our launch phase, which is getting your site out there for the world to see. And as we've kind of spoken about before, this does not necessarily mean finished. It's the conclusion of this kind of phase of your website, and then we move on to maintenance and kind of ongoing stuff. It should be not something that is just marked as done and then you move on to your next thing. It should live and grow with you.
Excellent, thank you.
There's a question in there that might be applicable for you, Robin.
Yes, so somebody's asked, our legacy website has lots of content. How do we best create the new cut down content for the new site? Fantastic question, and one that we get faced with quite a lot. So it depends on your provider's process. What's mostly useful for you is a content audit. So really looking at what you've got and kind of saying, does it stay or does it go, based on kind of different criteria that's important to you. So is it out of date? Is it wrong? Is it kind of, does it misrepresent what you do as an organization? Does it need to exist, but perhaps in an archive and not kind of front and center on your website? Where could you preserve something but not kind of make a lot of clutter? So a lot of the kind of content design piece of it is making sure that you've got clear hierarchy as well. So you don't need to bin everything, but you do need to think about what are those kind of layers. So what does somebody need to know at first glance? What's those kind of main menu items? And then if you do need your annual reports from 5 years ago, do they sit much deeper in the website because they're not somebody's first concern? So yeah, I've got a wee content tool that I can share with you that can help you start thinking about that. But that's something that your provider would hopefully help you with at your wireframing stage. And that can be quite a good way to shortcut that, because if you do have a really kind of extensive website, the idea of doing a content audit and going through every single page is really intimidating. And yeah, totally get that.
Yeah. I would add to that around creating the new kind of cut down content. Your Google Analytics can, or if you've got analytics tools set up, can give you an idea of where to prioritize. So it will show you your most accessed content, and if it's something that you don't necessarily think is important but your users do, it's still about making the path to those, whether it's resources or whatever. I'm saying resources because it tends to be resources that build up and need kind of reevaluated and restructured. So that's kind of on my brain at the moment. But yeah, the analytics can help with kind of prioritization, but it's also about making sure that those avenues are still available on your new website. So for example, a really good example that I've got of when I used to work in the Chamber of Commerce in Glasgow. I did kind of digital comms there, and our top viewed page by by miles and miles and miles was when the bank holidays are in Glasgow. Now, that's not necessarily aligned to the objectives of the organisation. I guess it's about spreading information, I get that, but they have performed really well in terms of search engine optimisation for when people are typing in bank holidays Glasgow. If you've got pages, or kind of even if they're going to be legacy pages that work really well for you in that way, how can you make use of people's attention while you have it? So if people are coming to you for something like bank holiday outlines, what can you also put on that page that they might not have come to the website for specifically, and how you can kind of make the most of that traffic. There. Oh, sorry, were you going to come in, Robin?
Yeah, sorry, just were you finished?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just to answer that question in the chat there about kind of your content specs, yes, your provider should provide you with content specs. It would be unfair if they just kind of said, we'd like you to write this, and then you write kind of 500 words that I'm sure are excellent, and then they say, actually, we don't need that. So yes, they should provide you, and lots of different providers will have different systems. We tend to have a kind of content planner, which you'll go alongside your wireframe, where we'll say we want a headline here, we want it to be roughly about this, we need 1 to 2 lines explaining what this is, and kind of really breaking it down and saving you from the blank page. But I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to keep moving through our presentation if I can.
Can I jump in with one more of my red flags?
Of course you can.
It's just in response to Maria's point. So content specs, e.g. image size, etc. If you have a website and you're still having to manually resize the images to a certain aspect rate, or even a certain dimensions, and that is being prescribed from you on your website, that's not flexible, and that I know that's a headache because I've had to do it like previously. It is very possible to have images fit without you having to resize them on a website. So push for that if you can, without having to save yourself that admin headache of constantly going in Canva and resizing an image and stuff. There are ways for that to happen automatically, is what we're saying.
Nice. We're going to race through these bits, and I think we've covered a lot of them already. So as we said, we've kind of got resources we'll be sharing on SEO and content design. Briefly, if nobody can find your website, there's no point in having it. And if it doesn't say anything good, there's no point in it being there. Obviously, your user testing's important in making sure that that's useful. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about cybersecurity, Jen, but just to flag that there's not enough time to talk about that in enough depth. If you'd like to understand a bit more about cybersecurity, we've got some beginner sessions coming up on the Curve in June to go into that in more depth, but I'll hand over.
I think in terms of this, if an organisation or a provider hasn't mentioned cybersecurity, again, red flag. There are things that you should maybe kind of look out for in terms, particularly if you're working with, in kind of bigger logistical areas. GDPR compliance. So one, we're all kind of like familiar with everyone's favourite acronym just now, but what are the kind of requirements of GDPR compliance is that your website server is based in the UK. So it's worth checking, because sometimes they're not, and you can get cheaper hosting overseas, but then that would obviously mean that we're not keeping that data within the UK. So that's a good one to look out for. But yeah, the question that I've written to that here is, what does the provider outline and how much attention do they pay to this? The other thing I would look at in terms of cybersecurity is, what does your ongoing support look like? How does the organisation protect you from threats? How does the organisation handle threats when they occur, and they will occur? Just to flag that, no site is invulnerable to hacking. We've seen it happen to banks. We've had it seen happen to, Amazon and things. They kind of organise businesses that have the best that you can get in terms of cybersecurity, and it still happens. So I think it sounds scary, but it's more like when it happens rather than if it happens, and just making sure that you and your provider are as equipped for that as possible.
Can I just quickly come in on that as well, Jen, just to say as well, SCVO, Alison and the cybersecurity team at SCVO is a really good person for advice. We'll have some training coming up, so if you kind of sign up for the Curve training, you'll get an email about that, but also the SCVO cybersecurity pages are really good. There's loads of good advice and information there. You might want to also think about working towards Cyber Essentials accreditation, but again, that's another workshop.
Nice. I'll move through. From memory, we're near the end, so we're kind of moving to your questions now. Closing and next steps. Oh gosh, I'm skipping ahead of myself. So yeah, to summarise, we're wanting to prepare thoroughly, define your goal, budget and scope. Jen's going to share a wonderful resource that she's made that is helping you to kind of put that together. Building strong relationships, so really making sure that you trust who you're working with and that they're not trying to bamboozle you in any way. Like we said, your website should be an empowering process where you learn a bit more about digital as well. And kind of continuously improve. It's never finished. Should be in as fantastic a place as it can be for launch, but making sure that it's easy enough for your developer or you to update if and when you get any feedback or need to add anything. We've got some resources to share, but I'd love to check in with you guys, and I'll stop the recording shortly. This is our kind of link here for the Third Sector Geeks group if you want to join that. Just to kind of be aware, if you do join it, your phone number will be visible to everyone else in the group, but it is a closed group. So there's some security in that, but yeah, just to let you know. This is a lovely picture of Manish from our latest Tech for Good, just for one last push for the Glasgow crowd. But we'd love to hear from you. We've spoken a lot. I'm going to stop the recording there so that you've got a kind of space to share with us. And I'll stop sharing my screen as well so that I can see you all.